Good afternoon and welcome to Women Speaking. This afternoon we discuss the contentious issue of the balaalo question. This basically surrounds the migration of nomadic pastoralists, primarily from Western Uganda to northern Uganda. This is particularly the Acholi sub-region. This phenomenon has sparked tensions surrounding land ownership, cultural differences, economic competition, and environmental impacts. The balaalo, who are often cattle keepers, are accused by the local communities of encroaching on communal land, claiming crops and threatening their cultural identity, while they, that is the balaalo, claim their constitutional right to settle anywhere in Uganda. Despite government interventions, including directives by the president to have them move out of the region, this issue has still prevailed. It has obviously highlighted deeper challenges in Uganda's governance, particularly around equity and regional integration. This afternoon, we discuss this very, very contentious and pertinent matter. And with me to discuss this topic are some very interesting panelists. I trust that they will break down this topic brilliantly. So I shall introduce them from my extreme left coming in. On my extreme left is a very known face on this show. Nancy, I will not welcome you like I say every week. We will not be welcoming you. At this point, we should be welcoming everyone else. Miss Nancy Caroline Ayot is a feminist lawyer and a writer. Good afternoon, Nancy.
Hi, Danita. Thank you for hosting this show, and welcome, Trasyleen, to the show. We are happy to have you.
We are indeed happy to have you. Right next to me is a very phenomenal young lady, Miss Ankunda Trasyleen. She is a lawyer and a feminist. Good afternoon and welcome to the show, Trasyleen.
Good afternoon, Danita. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited again to meet Nancy here after a long time.
Yeah.
So I hope it's really going to be a very interesting conversation.
I trust it definitely will be. Ladies, this topic is obviously one that has prevailed for a lengthy period of time. It has highlighted a number of things in Uganda's governance structure that obviously need great discussion. So just to get us into the topic, Nancy, may you please give us some background as to the balaalo question, please excuse me, how it came into play, what the situation is right now, and then Trasyleen, I would kindly ask you to step in after and give us more context as to who the balaalo actually are and what's happening there.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm really happy to have this discussion on the show because it touches on land, not just for the local people or the balaalo, but also for women in Acholi sub-region as well. So I know for sure about the balaalo because of the contentions that are happening there. And in history class we can talk about how there were pastoralists and all those things, but it doesn't hit home until you actually see it interplay in real life. So as a person from Acholi sub-region, indeed, the first time that I heard of this conflict, this land conflict between local people and the balaalo, was in 2022. And around that time, not only were the local people dealing with the animal-human conflict in terms of encroachment of animals on their local land, but also the local people of Acholi were also dealing with the animal-people conflict in terms of animals coming out of the park. So this was an issue where they said, for the animals from the park, the government should deal with that. They should find a way to contain that. However, for this particular reason, I think the local people thought perhaps the first step would be to solve it. But to integrate more, to actually delve deeper into the issue, that is when the alarm was sounded that these people were buying ancestral land or communal land.
Okay.
Yes, communal land. And in Uganda's land tenure systems under Article 237, they provide for communal land under the customary land under the land tenure systems. And it should be governed according to the rules and regulations of a particular tribal group or particular group of people that own land in that particular area. As for the Acholi, we exist in clan systems, and clans are usually families, an extended family. It's a relation of cousins who own land in a particular area. say if it is this, if it is Ntinda around this area, you would say that Clan A owns land, or their ancestral land is in Ntinda, and it covers this much ground. And it's not particularly clear, the boundaries are not particularly clear, but you just know that they're clan leaders, and in case anyone wishes to use that land, that person should be primarily a member of the clan, and they can go and talk to the elders and say, identify themselves and say, I am going to plant, I am going to build a settlement, or I am going to do some farming on this piece of land, and I'm doing it with this person A, B, and C. So that has been the long-standing tradition. However, in the event that the person wants to introduce other people onto the land, it could be a different matter entirely, because that needs various stages of consultation. And the consultations are various because they know, because the land is owned by the entire clan, meaning the dead, the living, and the future clan members. In that respect, I would like to bring out the topic of women and the position of women in this, because I know that women, like myself, I would be entitled to actually do some activity on ancestral land. However, upon marriage, like patriarchal systems all are, it may be a bit difficult for me to actually have a stake in this. And you know, it usually depends on a family. There is no bad will, but it could bring...
It's just tribe, it's just tradition.
It's just tradition. When people talk about it, it's just tradition. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that some families actually do allow their daughters. They do not
Cast them out.
They do not cast them out. However, it could be different if the male members of the family feel differently about that. Now, in 2023, when the issue blew out of proportion, because not only was land being attacked in Acholi on that front, attacked also on that front, but also there were new raids from the Karamojong in East Acholi, from areas of Agago and Kitgum. They were having raids from the Karamojong in Kotido and Nabim. They were crossing over and raiding the local people, taking away animals. So that was another contention on land. And then we also had in West Acholi the power land conflict, but also in North, the Atiak sugar plantation.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of contention on land, and the people were decrying a lot of marginalization. And that time the president came in and also issued an executive order, and he said the balaalo should not buy customary land. And if they were buying customary land, they should get consent of the entire clan, or proceed with that type of caution. And for those who have already bought certain piece of land, or who are leasing, who are given leases on lands, even customary land, they ought to fence those lands so that
Their animals don't
cross over to people's gardens. And the leaders were not satisfied with that. The people were not satisfied with that. However, it presented a solution for that moment. But it also presents the greater question of our governance system and how things are handled, because even in communities, whether people are migrating and settling or not, there is a way of integration, and integration is by way of mingling of the two groups of people, getting to know each other and trying to coexist in harmony. And in that respect, if ever there were ways of solving problems, the best way would have been traditionally clan leaders of this side and clan leaders of this side, because no matter what we think of our formal justice systems, no matter what we think of the power of the government, they can never truly solve the issues at hand. Which brings us now to 2025, and I'm not saying that if certain events did not happen in between. But now in 2025, one of the biggest contentions is the fact that, number one, people still decry illegal sale of lands, like outside the customary regulations that are supposed to be done. And number two, they say there's still encroachment of animals onto their gardens. But number three presents a greater security risk and concern that people voiced, which is the fact that the balaalo are armed and they do not want to integrate with local communities. So I think that is the thing that spurred the executive order that came in. But having seen the different aftermaths of what happened, the executive order, which is to send the balaalo away from the entire Acholi sub-region, number one, and then also the real lack of actually on-ground dialogues to actually integrate to actually understand the problem better. I still feel like the executive order is not the right choice. Not only because it is now spurring anti-tribal sentiments that are going on in the entire country, but also because it is blowing an issue that could have been resolved under peaceful means out of proportion. I'm saying this because do I believe that there are some balaalo who have illegally transacted? I definitely do. Do I also believe that there are others who have not done the same? I definitely also believe that. However, there is no room for that. And when I listen to the Acholi leaders, they say that after the balaalo have left is when they will do the on-ground assessment, because they do not want to get undue influence. I understand them on that point. But at the same time, I am also hearing the side of the balaalo and their leaders, and they say they will not leave the land. They say this is tribalistic, and they also say that there is a lot of unfairness and the president does not have the right to make this. But what concerns me the most is the fact that when I listen to some of these conversations, they say we bought customary land, but we got permission.
Mm-hmm.
That is not possible with the type of system that is in Acholi right now, because it is not possible that you got permission from all the 6,000 families in a particular clan. It is not. And anytime there is dissent, it means that you cannot own such chunks of land in isolation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. I think that is a very in-depth breakdown of our background. Trasyleen, I'll bring you into the conversation right now, particularly in regards to introduction of who the balaalo are, what drove them in to actually particularly choose to settle in northern Uganda, and in this case, Acholi sub-region.
Okay. Nancy here gave quite a very elaborate background, but I'll try to add a few things here and there maybe. One thing is that when we talk about the balaalo question, we are looking at the land question, and largely in Uganda. We are looking at the security question, but then I'd also say we are looking at the aspect of migration. Now, where did this balaalo come from? This still is for sure well known that the balaalo are people who originally are not from Acholi sub-region. They could have come from Western, they could have come from Central here in Uganda, they could have come from anywhere but within Uganda. And these balaalo are not even just within Acholi sub-region, but because of the aspect of the larger amount of land that is in Acholi sub-region, which most people actually move for search for greener pastures, made a ground for as many people from across other regions, specifically Western region, to go to Acholi sub-region. Want to establish farms, ranches, and all that is happening. Now, when we again talk about the aspect of security and abiding by the laws that we find in a particular area, the balaalo go to Acholi sub-region, start up farms, where they have cattle, they have all that you can actually mention. Actually, amazingly, we also have balaalo who are doing these other projects of sim and growing all those other crops. And from my understanding is that the question of balaalo is not a question of we are tribalistic or we do not want a certain category of people in our community. The question is, those balaalo that settled or that are living in Acholi sub-region and abiding by the customs of the nature of the land where they are not being chased away. because these are people who are also having, growing their crops, and they're abiding by what the customs are saying. Now the issue is with the balaalo, who are actually into an aspect of, this is our land, we can do anything that we want with this land. And without putting into concept the aspect of security of other people's crops, the aspect of security of people in that community, because like Nancy said, is that we have a question of balaalo who own guns, who are guarding their cattle with guns, and who are letting their animals move around and destroy other people's crops. And when you talk about that, especially in the women perspective, is that these crops are actually sources of food to those communities. Most of those gardens are largely into the context of women. They're the ones planting those crops. That is perhaps where a young woman in Acholi is seeing the next bag of an harvest that will be able to help take her child to school. So if we are having animals destroying all those huge chunks of land and their crops, then it means they are left helpless. And when someone is speaking from a position of oppression, a position of depression, most likely is you're not going to expect the best. But however, this has been different. From 2017, these people have tried to negotiate, and they are saying, you are here, but can you abide by what our customs say? Can you listen to us? Can you protect our land? Can you protect our crops? Because the question is on rights of individuals or rights of people in the community versus the rights of animals. If you're saying animals should be free to move around as if they are human beings, well knowing that they will not actually be able to produce the best results in that community, then you're losing out the point. But also, in reality, is that 2017, those issues come around, and negotiations here and there, and somehow people try to seemingly show that they have understood. But did they actually understand? Of course not. Until we are here today with the aspect of the most recent executive order, the directive number 2 of the president. And the president is saying, please, balaalo, leave Acholi, leave Lango, leave West Nile, go back to where you came from. And to me, again, the aspect is, where did these people come from? Because through conversations, some of them have been saying for them they don't have where to go, it's their land, they purchased the land. But also another controversy of the government and some other entities giving pastoralists money to go and acquire land in Acholi, and you have someone buying a whole acre of land perhaps at 300,000 shillings Ugandan. Or you have someone buying huge chunks of land because they actually have the capacity, or they have the mandate, or they have the security, or they have the arms and everything they think they can. To me, that is land grabbing. Because if you're to look at the system of customary tenure system, you do not have a title that the title is in my name's Trasyleen, Ankunda, I own this. It is supposed to be, or it is owned communally. So if we are in an angle where we are saying that, now look, this one is saying I own this land, the other one is saying I own this land, it's not the way it should be. But also progressively is that after the presidential directive, and I think which was warning or telling them that by 25th they should be finding their way out, we have also seen recommendably General Saim Sae, at least he has tried to go with all the trucks and transfer his cattle from is it Nyoya, yes, to back to Western. I don't know wherever he took them, but he has been able to at least abide by that directive. But that's 1 in a million. And again, most of those people with those cattle are generals, are those people that actually have this and this. So they think they have the enough manifesto or the enough backup for them to be able to challenge those aspects of, this is my land, I owned it, I bought it. But lastly, also as I conclude on the aspect of the background, is that this is going to be a challenging aspect that, for example, how many people are going to actually afford transferring those cattle from that side to this side? And another issue I had from one of the conversations was that if you're talking about telling these people to transfer their animals, that why are they transferring only old cows? Why are they transferring these calves? Are there cows only these that have grown already? Or where are those grown cows coming from if they do not have these young calves? So again, maybe it's the aspect of, are they also, want people actually still more outside the land, to the outside community where they are going. But largely my conversation on the balaalo is that we are basically looking at a question of a political question, but also a land question and security. So as we proceed, I hope we'll be able to juxtapose all those and see what remedy do we think could actually be the best.
Thank you so much, Trasyleen, for that insightful breakdown. I think it has gone a long way into helping us understand the contextual issues at hand. Nancy, I'll bring you into the conversation right now. So one of the things that has been touched upon is, obviously they're moving into northern Uganda, West Nile, Lango, Acholi. And Trasyleen mentions that obviously there are large tracts of land there. But why else would northern Uganda be viewed as a perfect migration spot in this country? I think it's very important for us to understand, at least like the historical context, something that would drive a group of people to believe that, northern Uganda is the way to go.
Well, let me just say that it hasn't always been the ideal place to go to begin with, because straight from our history, from the time of independence, one of the biggest political questions of our country has been the northern question, that there is marginalization and the country is being left behind. That chunk of the country is being left behind in terms of service delivery and even security. Now, coming down to the years of conflict, especially with the LRA war, we do not have to think that that was something that was only experienced by Acholi sub-region, because people from West Nile suffered the same effects, though not as badly as Acholi. People from Lango suffered the same fate. All of them were living in in the displacement camps. And during that time, it wasn't just ideal to go out and farm, to the point that we had World Food Program and the UN bringing in food for people with support from the government, of course. But also, it wasn't ideal for anybody to be out there building, trying to settle and use and live the humane life. So it is only after the war and the peace that was negotiated through the peace talks, because we cannot actually say that the government defeated the rebels or the rebels defeated and gave up, but it's because leaders negotiated peace, religious leaders, political leaders, they negotiated peace, because this had been going on for 20 plus years and the people were tired. Now, to this moment, we are at the stage where most parts of many parts of the country are experiencing capitalism at its height, and mostly the late stages of capitalism, where everything is monetized, including land, and there is hardly space for any more places to exploit. And yet the people of northern Uganda are just beginning to resettle, to actually build their cities, to build their economies, and poverty is at its highest rate.
So do you think this makes it an opportune place for...
It is an opportune place. And when we go to northern Uganda with friends who are from different parts of the region, because one time we had a project down in my hometown in Agago, in Kalong, in Agago. So I was moving in a vehicle with friends of mine, and I told them, you know what? We are almost there. We were 30 kilometers away, and I told them, we are almost there. In about 1 hour, we will be there. And because of the bad roads and the driving and the huge stretch of land, everyone called me a liar, because they said, we cannot possibly almost be there. There is so much land. It's like, where does this land come from? But the thing is, not only did the war take away the population that might be settling in those lands, in fact, other people are just returned from the bush. There are a bunch of children there who do not know who their parents are. They do not have national IDs, but they are Ugandan children who are taken to the bush. They do not know where their fathers come from. They cannot get national IDs because they can't trace where their ancestry is from. That is also another question of identity. But the point is, there is land, and there is both customary land titles, but also freehold titles. Yes. So I don't think people understand when they say that there are also freehold titles in Acholi, but they are there. They are freehold titles and they are up for sale. And truth is, because of the poverty and how much people want money, they are very cheap. I can actually say that in a trading center right now, land is about 10 to 15 million only if it is really expensive. And you can find it at less. But those are valuable lands with that whose titles that you can get from the ministry that do not have any discrepancies like the customary land. So it is an ideal place when you look at it, especially in terms of vegetation and the environment and all those things. But also right now we're facing a crisis of deforestation in the region for charcoal. Because while the forests are up there, people are cutting down trees because they're trying to make a living. In capitalism, whatever you find, you use to make a living, regardless of the impact on the environment. And had it been only like a few sections of the population doing that, maybe it could have been controlled. But now it has heightened to a big degree, and it's threatening the environment. Remember, this is one of the drier parts of the country. That means that we risk the semi-arid weather of Karamoja coming down, which is really bad. Now, the reason why the lands are suitable is because the land is huge, and even when it's communally owned, you can see how big it is, but it is also suitable for pasture. It's suitable for agriculture. We experience the 2 rainy seasons like all parts of the country, and people try. However, right now, the farming methods are majorly rudimentary, and not much of the results yield as much as they should. But also, the transition from our original seeds to now more quote improved methods of farming, I have a big question on that, because I feel like the environment heals itself, and if we continuously farm using our original seeds, we might actually regain back the value and the fertility of the land. But right now we have seeds from different corporations that are killing the value of the land. So not only are people poor, they are also desperate. Therefore, that means that the land there is unoccupied, so largely unoccupied. So, and also cheap when you think about it in terms of buying, but also people are desperate to sell it. Now, it may not be the whole clan, but there are individuals who sacrifice the clan for the next meal. And we cannot blame them. We cannot entirely blame them. But that is why it is important to do some due diligence while buying land. In law, you have to do due diligence to understand whether or not there are people who have certain interests on a particular land. And I refuse to believe that those who actually purchased customary land did not know about it, because these are highly educated people. But also, let's look at the economy in terms of how it is not safe to keep money in banks anymore. Yes, right now, if you can keep your money in the bank, it can be tracked. If you buy some property, it can be tracked. How about cattle? Can it be tracked directly? Is there a direct way to track money when you've invested in animals? I feel like this is another move by capitalists. And let me tell you, sometimes I feel like the pastoralists own ground may not even be the owners of the cattle. Because in Uganda's current economy, there is no way that over 2,000 okay, not 2,000, but like over 100 or 500 people from the same kind of background and same place, or people who closely know each other, have that type of money together. I feel like there is a sponsorship, and this brings us back to the governance question, which is the fact that people are consolidating money somewhere else and denying the local people money. So the land in northern Uganda looks available, it looks cheap, and it looks like it is there and ripe for plucking by capitalists, which is untrue. That, in my opinion, is what makes it that way. But also you need to look at the greater political question of northern Uganda, which is the fact that it just doesn't come with the realities of what they face. It also comes with narratives and propaganda that are perfectly pushed when they talk about people of northern Uganda. One is the fact that some people believe that they're not highly educated, they are poor, and they do not have the means to actually make their lands profitable. So I have even had people on social media say that if the balaalo go, who will save them? Like who will save them out of their grass-thatched houses? Because that is the perception that people have. It's a perception that they have, and you also see it when they put on media the roads in Gulu city, and people are like, "You mean Gulu is like that? You mean Gulu looks that good?" I mean, my man, it's been more than 10 years, and there's been some investment in the roads. People have been trying to rebuild, and it shows in the way that the communities are built up. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Nancy. Trasyleen, I'll bring you into the conversation again. Recently, the balaalo came and demonstrated. They led a demonstration to, I think it was Parliament, and it was outside there that some of their representatives spoke up about how, and one of the things that they quoted is, I think, this is something that is devolving into a tribal matter, and it is going to brew such tribal sentiments. And eventually, one of the representatives mentioned that this is how genocides happen. This is how genocides happen. And so, it was one of those things that sparked a really heavy debate, especially on social media, because, some people could actually see how it could brew sentiments of hate, sentiments of, a division could be harbored, and then chaos could eventually emerge. Do you believe that this matter, if not dealt with adequately, can be one of those issues that spark a greater tribal and, genocidal issue?
Well, I think for starters, everyone in Uganda, you have a right to own property. I can come from Bushenyi, I can buy land in Uganda. You can come from Uganda, you can buy land in the west. You can come from Acholi, you can buy land in Central. You can come from Central and buy land in Acholi. And I think over time, again, the realities of life are that if, for example, you're to look at the greater Central where we are now, if you're to, for example, if Baganda said, you people go back to your places, you realize that Central is a home and region of almost all of us across the country. We have stayed there, we have lived there, we have bought land, and now it feels like this is where we belong. Now, to the other extent of as many people shifting now to greener pastures, that when I buy land in Uganda, for example, I must know what land I have bought, one. Two, for example, if it is lease, I must know what kind of lease I have been given, what are the covenants, what are the terms and conditions, what must I breach and what must I not breach, and must I breach anything in any case, and what are the repercussions of if I breach this covenant, do I still have the occupancy as a lessor or as a lessee? Now, when it goes to actually, again, to the aspect of balaalo, is that, like I'd mentioned earlier, for those that have actually because we are talking about peaceful coexistence, and I think if we are looking at an aspect of people actually in the first place allowing you to settle in that land, whether you bought it or not, to me, again, is goodwill. It is goodwill that we are all Ugandans and we can, coexist together and do activities along one another. But to the dissatisfactory part is where now people feel, okay, yes, you are here, but you're not doing better, you're doing harm than good. Or even robbing us of the few or of the less that we have, instead of actually making it better. I know for a fact that all those, for example, maybe who are doing who are things like some plantations and all that, you not find that they are employing only people who are from balaalo or whatever. So in a way, it is also an aspect, an environment for creation of job opportunities for some of those people. But in an angle where you find that those same productions that you are doing are at a disadvantage because of another category of people that you thought would actually be of help, then I think for everyone who sins, they must be punished. And punishment, of course, is not something that comes out of goodwill that I'll take it in. If I'm punished, that I will not complain. Most of the times, everyone who is punished, they'll go ahead to complain. Even if it is a case, someone will say, no, that was not the result. They will appeal. So, and in the aspect of appealing, someone is saying, no, they have so many questions of, it is my land, I bought this land, I have title over it, but really, is the title the valid title that you should actually have? Did you obtain it in the rightful means? Now, going back to the aspect of the tribes, you all know that we have Baganda and people of North. Almost all of us in Uganda are somehow related. That is why you'll find that the aspect of intermarriages today has actually increased. We have our sisters from Bushenyi getting married to Lango. We have our brothers from Lango getting wives from Bushenyi or from Ntungamo. So the aspect of having that room of we are one is actually there. But to the greater extent of, are we actually one? Are we? When you go back to those conversations, the other time I was interacting with a friend and I told them that in as much as you keep preaching and say, we are one, but when you go back home, you are a Catholic, you are an Anglican, you are a Muslim, your father tells you, don't ever bring here a man who is not a Muslim. Your sister is saying, why are you in love with that man from the north? Maybe from the north they're saying, we don't want a Muganda. When we sit back again in our homes, are we actually one? Because to me, if we shout we are one, but there are those small things that we have failed to manage and have become the bigger questions. Trust me, it still puts up that the aspect of oneness in some way is a myth. I might shout here, but when I go back home, hi, your relatives, everyone, of all people, why did you choose that tribe? You know, of all the men we have here, of all the women we have here in the East, why would you go to Shema? You want to share on power, you know. People see marriage and the aspect of intermarriages not as a oneness step, but as a step of you want to get closer to power, or perhaps you want to relate with these people, or maybe they have cattle, things around that. Now, is it possible that it could actually spark out, again, tribal instincts, which I've said are not in isolation, they are always there, really. Even we cannot hide the fact that they are not there, they are there. But on the face of it is that, I think in around 2022, the president had an engagement with some of those clan leaders and elders in the Chole sub-region, and they're able to come to a consensus and said, you know, look, yes, these are Ugandans, it's okay, let them be on this land, but can they live by the rules and the customs of the customary tenure systems that they are on? And there was hope. You know, some said, yes, we are willing to do that. But eventually the aspect of power, someone who has 2,000 cattle, for you to stand up and tell them, leave, there's going to be another force in that person saying, I am not going anywhere. Perhaps maybe also they are worried, when I live with my cattle, for example, where am I taking them? I used an example of Sadim Sade because perhaps he could have actually had where to take his cattle when he gets them off and brings them to the west or wherever he took them. But there is someone who might not even have where to take that cattle. How do we realign the aspect of unity and harmony in an environment where there is no listening ear, there is no respect for one another? Because I think again it goes back to the aspect of respect. Are you actually respecting that Acholi customs say A, B, C, D? Now that I am here, how do I fit to the customs, because customs customarily are those very emotional but also very distinctive measures that have over time been used to strike up wars. You have an angle of maybe if you look at maybe like Bataka Uprising and all those other Namaherero and all those, you find that it is a group of a certain category against the other category. Now, the other challenge that we might have along the way of transition of security in terms of tribalism. The other day I listened to Dr. Sarah on the big talk, and one of the things she highlighted was that if, for example, this is a political period we are in today, if the aspect of, if you've been in an area for 6 months, for more than 6 months at that time before elections, you can actually contest in that area. Now, if you're looking at a point of having as many people who almost want to even get bigger than the real owners of the land in that area, it means that tomorrow those same people could actually stand up, could contest on those positions. Now, if you have a majority of backup of as many people who migrated from wherever they migrated to that area, then it means their freedom one day will be lopped away. It means that their independence within the region themselves is being encroached upon. Honestly, immigration issues, we've had them, we've had refugees, we've had people always move from one area to another. But where it is a Ugandan and majority of Banyankore are now settled maybe in West Nile, you might think there is a political question there, there is a problem. But again, to say that, yes, there could be an aspect of tribal sentiments that could, if not treated well, could bring up even many other wars in regards to the fight for freedom, but also to the fight for security or the fight against insecurity within those different areas.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I chip in real quick?
Briefly.
Yes, I agree with almost every submission that she has made, because in the country today, we can no longer actually fight credible religious wars, because all across the spectrum in Uganda, we have Catholics, we have Muslims, we have Anglicans, and other things, even cropping up religions like Buddhism and all that. We have that. However, the most vulnerable point right now is the tribal sentiments. And let's look at it this way. I feel like it's a failure of the governance systems, because the people in government have made it look like there is only a section of people in government to the detriment of all other Ugandans. And when you see the trolling online on what's going on, people are taking sides. Oh, me from Buganda, I support these people. Me from the East, I support these people. That is so uncalled for. Like no one even mobilized people to be like that.
So
but
irrelevant.
But we are in a fragile state, and right now we talk about transition because we've had the same people for over the Bush War heroes in government for over 40 years, and people are tired. But the thing is, people who look to politicize Uganda on the weakness of tribalism are the ones who started the whole idea of the tribalism that is going on. Because right now, the issue was never tribalistic, because in Acholi itself, they have Agisu who own freehold titles and all those things. There are people from Buganda, there are people from West Nile. It is not tribalistic at all. So we are in a very fragile state, and if we don't look at it critically, or if we do not debunk these statements, but most importantly, if the government does not take credible steps to actually reconcile the two groups and make good recommendations that fit both sides, obviously we're going to a catastrophic moment. Because people are also saying, aren't they actually in central Uganda? Don't they have land in other parts of the world? And they're not interrogating the fact that these people may not have they got titles of land according to the regulations of the different communities. Now, I'm not saying that they are not actually land grabbers. That's a lie. It's a lie. And sinning and doing bad things is not actually strict to just one tribal group. it goes across to everyone. That is why it is particularly fragile. And I feel like this moment and why we are discussing this question is because of the tribal sentiments that actually sparked.
Can I add something small?
Please.
Yes, so Nancy has reminded me of something, that for us to actually address this system, we have to understand that the word tribal in itself is a colonial word.
Yeah.
That if, for example, you go to Western, you find maybe some of the words, if someone says maybe Omuntu, then when you come back to Fort Portal, you find a person is almost the same language. When you come to Uganda, you find it's almost, again, the same language, the same wording. Now, the aspect of tribalism on a more colonial weapon as a tool to actually disempower, but also directly and indirectly rule, seems to me to have been a greater achievement that they intended to achieve and have succeeded. When you actually go to colonial, so when you go to those other countries, Africa, outside Africa, you realize they do not have a word such as tribe. What is equivalent a tribe here to them is a nation. Now the wording that what you'd have actually called a nation, you're calling it a tribe, is very problematic. It is in a way that I am different, I am in this category. For you, you're this person, while for you, you look like that, while for me, I look like this. So to address this is to actually realize that even the boundaries that we have, that this is actually sub-region, this is Ankole sub-region, all those were just lines drawn on paper by the colonialists. And we should actually be able to embark on the journey that we must redress and actually not fail. Because I think when they listen to this, they are still smiling and they're like, oh, our long-term project has actually been long-term. It's still in existence.
Yeah, but also the definition of tribe. And, I keep using it because we even use it on our national IDs, really. But by definition, a tribe is like a condescending word to mean people who live in caves and and have all this, which doesn't even reflect the reality of our standing today.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Nancy, I'll just continue with you still. Trasyleen mentioned a very important point. As we reach the end of the show, Trasyleen mentioned a very important point, which is basically the fact that those who are doing wrong ought to be punished, right? But before punishment comes into play, one ought to go through due process, right? And does a new due process in this country look like a presidential directive? Due process ought to, legally speaking, look like, hey, you say these people have trespassed on our land, hey, you say this. We ought to take you before a court of law in a more fantastic society, and we ought to take you before a court of law, and the judicial system decides based on the merits of the law who is right and who is wrong and the next step forward. And yet we are not seeing that happening. It actually looks like it's more of a tedious process. So when we I just think you should go ahead and just break down further for us, like what first of all, like which legal framework would we go under? What would we even go under the law, or should we just rely on the presidential directives?
Honestly, the presidential directive is a law to begin with. However, you need to understand that this is not a matter of like this person's cow stepped on this one's garden only. This is a matter that has gone tribal, it has gone regional, it has also become political. Therefore, it must be handled very sensitively.
Oh, before you continue, my bonus question to that, when you say it has gone political, Trasyleen give us history. From 2017, this has been an issue that has been brewing. 2025 is when we see a presidential directive being issued. Talk to us also about that. The timing is very interesting.
Thank you. So it is and it is political. Now, do I think that it can be addressed by a presidential directive? No. I think more should be done because it is very sensitive. We need leaders of both groups to actually sit down and have a dialogue. And the assessment because actually leaders are saying that there will be an assessment on the ground to talk about who did what and who did not do what, in order to understand, so that even those who were lied to can be compensated. You hear? Even those who legitimately bought land and they were defrauded, they can find a way of resolving those issues. So what we need is actually a way, an amicable way of resolving these issues, and it cannot be done by law. It is honest. I am telling you the truth that it will never work, because there are certain issues that are so sensitive. That is when you bring the lawlessness, because if you come and impose a sanction on either group and they do not agree with them, they are going to react the way we are seeing reactions right now. So I believe that a dialogue process is necessary, and we need to get mediations and alternative dispute resolutions going on, because that is the best way to resolve this issue, but it's also the best way to actually assess what actually happened on ground, to see who did things that are not within the confines of the law. And when that happens, that is when now we can bring them before a court of law, because then we find witnesses, then we find actual facts on the ground. But right now it is not possible. The reason why they're saying the balaalo must leave, and I don't know if it's the right directive at this moment. It could be, it could not be, because it is bigger than we actually know. The reason why they're saying that is because they do not want any type of interference with the assessment on the ground. They do not want interference from either parties. Now, you cannot tell the local people to move. You cannot tell the local people to move, because ideally, where will they go? Where will they go? But I think that the solution that the MAUs, the Chief Justice and the Honorable Lanyas are presenting is actually a good one, because they want to actually do assessment. They want anyone who was wronged to actually get the compensation that they deserve. Now, on politics, yes, it's a political year, and yes, we know that the head of state always makes promises towards elections, and this could be one of them. But we can't tell, because this has been going on for a long time. So what if he felt like the votes are being endangered, so I must make a presidential directive swiftly? It could also be that. It could also be that. I don't want to say that that was his mindset, but at the same time, we know that he has made promises, and immediately after elections, he defaults on those promises. However, from where I am sitting, this is so sensitive that he cannot afford to actually go back on such a directive. Because if he does, then that shows that he's siding with power brokers, or he's siding with a tribal group that people believe he belongs to. That doesn't look good for his political image. That doesn't look good for the security of his tenure or anything like that. Yes, that's my submission.
Okay, thank you so much, Nancy. Ladies, we have come to the close of yet another show. I will kindly ask you to give your closing remarks on this matter, but also ask you to, give, just your contributions about if you believe they have more ideas about how best they should be handled, particularly Trasyleen. Nancy has spoken quite a bit about that. You could add that into your closing remarks. Yes. Please keep them brief.
Thank you, Danita, for hosting us, and also Civic Space. As we come to a conclusion, the aspect of negotiation is one that should not come by force. It is one where people realize that there is a problem. It is one where those who have been ordered to leave realize that, oh, where next? Where am I going? And I think, to me, at that point, that is where they are more vulnerable to understand the grievance or the challenges that have caused on that land. But if they are not able to realize that, and also if the government is giving that directive, what is it doing perhaps on those people who are saying they have nowhere to go? Eventually, it is going to have a whole shift of, we are shifting from this region now to this other region. Because where else do we go? Those who actually genuinely don't have where to go or where they came from. But is there someone who doesn't have where they came from? So The issue of roundtable negotiations is one I would recommend. However, they have tried and it has failed. So it should be a civic engagement, especially in the aspect of both the aggrieved and I don't know even now if it is the victim and aggrieved, because now this time it was this side, now the other time it is this side saying where do we go. But if we can have those
Parties.
negotiations coming and with aspect of actually believing that we are at fault and so we must abide by this and that. And also, do you think that people virtually would be willing to reconcile after you have over time infringed on the same that you promised to fulfill? Yeah, and lastly is to say thank you all for always having us here. Yeah.
Thank you, Trasyleen. Go ahead, Nancy.
I particularly sympathize with the local women on ground because I know that they use farming to support their families. They do majority of their economic activity on the lands that are actually in question right now, and they do not even have a strong tie to these lands. Okay, they do have a strong tie to the lands, but they do not have a lot of authority over their sources of income and their sources of livelihood. So that is a sympathy for me. And on the other hand, I also would like to encourage both parties to actually avoid stoking the tension, to avoid fanning the flames, because in this country, we know the history of conflict anywhere. All parts of this country have experienced conflict at some point, and the political season is not the time to do this. And I'm not saying that any other time is a good time to actually fan the flames of conflict, but it is not the good time to do that. I believe that with the same goodwill that they went in to actually negotiate on the lands, they should come forward and actually tell what is true. Thirdly, I'd like to make a call to people out there to actually question a lot of things that they present to them on media, because you cannot hear about two particular groups fighting and then you take a side quickly, because you're joining a conflict you have no idea about, and you're not even joining it with credible information. I always say that lack of information is worse than disinformation, because with your lack of information, you're going out there to misinform other people. That is a terrible thing. It is bad when tensions are high. And lastly, to the government, to actually do what is right. And if there are certain brokers or landowners or purported landowners within the ranks of the authority, they need to let go of those lands, because that is not a good way to actually transact. It doesn't spell goodwill, and it's putting the country in a bigger problem than what they envision. Profits are not everything. We need this nation even after 2026, or even after those people are long dead. Thank you so much, Danita, for hosting us, and thank you, Trasyleen, for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Trasyleen. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the close of yet another Tuesday afternoon. It has been my delight to host you today. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. The question of the balaalo question itself is not one that is isolated to northern Uganda and a few people from western Uganda. It is one that links into our very nature as a society, as a community, as a nation, about our ability to resolve conflicts, to live harmoniously. So as we interact with this issue, let us educate ourselves, let us come with open minds and open hearts to see the very best of this, to see the very best outcome of it, because as the general public, we are stakeholders in this matter in one way or another. The discussions we have around this topic play a role in how decisions are made at a certain level. So let us interact with this matter as stakeholders would, knowing the gravity of our opinions. It has been a delight, like I said earlier, to host you. My name is Turiho Danita. Have a lovely afternoon.